So we get space character for any size for the string, and then we format it by putting star on the left and the right side, and putting the gap between the text and the star with another space as well. And that's for the step 3, which is putting star on the left and right side. Then the last step is to assign the final result into another variable. So we get the variable second as the type string in the final step. So if you read some expression and don't quite understand what it is trying to do, and try to dissect into each component of the expression and see if you can get into information about what types is going to give you and what kind of values you are going to get. If you don't understand, then it's time to look for the documentation and some help. Maybe asking TA only if you don't really understand something around some code. If you try doing this repeatedly for many statements, then you get into more understanding on the Rust code. So last time I showed you how we can come up with the starting point for drawing the frame around the text, and then go deeper into the details so that we can complete the final program. So most of the time, if we write the program that prints the pattern into the screen, we would start from to think on how many rows we are going to write first, and then for each row, how many columns or how many characters that we are going to print on each line. And that means we usually have to write nested loops for outer loops for each row, and then the inner loops for each characters on the same line. And for the frame around some text, this is the condition that we check for the border. So we check the rows and the columns for the border, which is the edge. So the value should be on 0 or on the right or the bottom side. So that's the condition, and you can use the Boolean OR operator to chain all the conditions together so that we can combine every condition that matches the whole border within the same if condition. And sometimes if you write while loop, but keeps consistent updates on the counter, you can use for loop instead with the range. So I write two versions, one with the while loop and the updates of the counter at the end of the loop, and another version using for loop at the outer loop. But the inner loop is more complex, so we cannot simply use for loop in the inner loop, so that we have to return using the while loop and for writing on the same line. And these lines can be configured to be different values so that we can have the padding of different size. And if we change the pad for something other than 2, like 4, for example, then we can have the frame with larger border. So let's run it with cargo run. I need to put at least one for feeding the values into the program. And that's for the padding of 4 characters around the border. And if you have code that have some parameters that you might change during a different runs, then maybe it might be used more often than just the main program. So you can move these parts into another function instead. And that would work well if you do it correctly. So if you move it into another function, then you can define pad as another parameter instead, and then call a function from the main function and reuse that part in the main. Okay, that's the previous example for the last time. So today, let's have a look at something more about the list of strings. If you have done something like this in Python before, you can do it in similar ways in Rust. So if you have the array of some strings that you want to join with some characters like comma, so that it lists each value separated by commas. You can do it by using the join method on the list of strings. Actually, you might have used this before on the previous lab on the Echo program. Actually, on the CAT program, if you still remember that. When we get list of values into the Excel program, we join it with some space so that it concatenates everything and print the final string on the text string. So instead of joining it with just space, you can put comma instead, so that we can build a list from several strings together, like this one. So if we have the patterns with programming language name like this, and we do print line with patterns.join, we can get comma separated list of the values printed out on the screen. And if you want to iterate through the elements in the array, one way that you can make use of is by calling the iter method on the array solve vector. You can apply this to either array or vector. So every time you call iterator method and get the mutable variable for later use, then you can use next to get the next value, so that you can repeatedly get each value from the vector by keep calling the next from one statement after another. So let's try something out in action. Okay, so let's start by writing these two lines first, and then if you want to start from reading the first value, you can do this one. Actually, it's not quite working, but let's have a run so that we can know what happens when we do this program run. Because I put it on another executable file, source code, so I need to specify the bin option on cargo run. Okay, I got unrelated error, so I need to remove something out first. Now we see the real error at line number 6 here, print line X, which Rust tells us that we get the values of type option. So from this message, we can look into this and see that iter.next would get us the option type values. So actually we want the values within the option. So there are several ways that we can get into the values. One way to do it is by using the unwrap method. But this is usually used for the quick testing because it assumes that we have the values. But if we don't have the values, then the program would crash at that point by using unwrap. So if you do unwrap the values, you get the values for the first item by calling the iterator and calling the next method. If you repeat using this until the iterator is exhausted by calling next for 5 times, then you see what happens. So let's change the variable x to be mutable. Then do this repeatedly until it exhausts the values. At this point, I do this 4 times, so we still have the values to extract. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4 printed out on the screen if you do this code. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4. If we try it another time, then we get something different. So you can see that after number 4, we get panic from the Rust program. And there's no point writing another statement after this because it won't run after this point. So you can see that So you can see that at line 18, line 18 won't be run because we crash at line 17. So that's the first way to extract the values from option. Okay, so v1.iter will give you the values that actually points to the values inside the arrays, the original arrays. So we call this iterator because it is like the keys to access the data into the array values. But we can only read one value at a time from inside the array or vector that the iterator is referring to. Actually, we can use subscript for the arrays, like what I have explained before. Like you can do this file. But if you combine this with loop, you need to use the slice for numbers, and then have to use that number for indexing with the array together. But with iter, you don't have to refer to the array, original array name in order to read the values from. And by reading one values at a time, the logic, the flow of reading the values flows naturally. Okay, this is another way that we can extract the values from the iterator that refers to some array. So as we know that iter.next would give you the option values. So we can extract the option values using the if-let statement, which is a shorthand for getting the option, then use the match statement after it. So if we don't have the values to read, and then try reading the values from iterator, then if you try empty arrays, then you might need to specify some type to help brush out as well. So either doing this or do it like this. Because we have no values to read, the if-let would be false on that condition, and then no values is printed out on this point. So let's get back to the original values. If we use if-let statement, then we can read or extract the values from the vector or the array. Actually, in the print format, instead of passing the values after the format string, you can referring to the name within the format as well. So you can see that if I print x within the brace, within the format string, then that x value is printed out on the screen. So what I show you on the handout is the way to do something with the first values and then do something else with the rest of the values in the array. Actually, what I show you is working with iterator and array. But if I change this one from normal array to vector instead, you see that it still works. Because we can only read second values after the first one. So we need to nest if inside the first if, in order to read the second value. So if we do this for 4 times, then we need 4 levels of nested if within this. Which gets complicated very quickly because once you introduce more than 2 levels of indentation for the block, then the code becomes difficult, a bit difficult to read. Let's try reading more values after this point and see if we get panicked or not. Okay, we don't get panic because we check for every time we try to read the values, if we success in reading or not. If we don't success, then we just skip the process and then continue at the next statement in the program. But if we want to do something else, right from the second values up to the end of the array, then we can apply the loop instead. So we can do it with the while loop. And the while let works similar to the if-let statement. instead of doing it one time, we do it repeatedly until we exhaust the values from the iterator. Now we get the same result as the previous version. And with the nice structure, because we only have 2 levels of block for printing the values. And this is what I mean by doing one thing for the first values and doing other things for the rest of the values. Actually, if you just use the value, then every value is applied with the same statement. Like this one. So if we just do the value, then it applies same operation on every value. But if you want to make something different from one value and another, like the first value and the rest, then we can do the code like the example I showed you. And if you want to do it for a few values, then you can modify this code a bit by using a loop for a few times first, and then go through another loop for another operation. And from this example, you can apply the concept to write your own join version using the loop instead. So that's for the exercise. So I will show you how to do that. Actually, if you use if let with sum, that means the values on the right would have to be option, because the option provide the is in and enumeration with the sum and the none value. So what I put on the comments is the definition that you would see on the option for within the Rust code. So every time we have the values that is option, we can match it either for sum or for none. If it matches none, then it means that we get no values. So result would be something similar to this. It's not exactly the same thing because I don't remember the exact detail, but it's something along these lines. if you master how to use the match statement with enum, then and know the definition of option and result, then programming with option and result would not be too difficult. Because every time you want to extract the values from option, you use if let with sum to match the sum value. But if you match the result, then you check for the OK values and the error value for the error condition. Like on this example, when you try to open the file, for example, this my result is actually the type definition into another result type. So every time we try getting the returning the result for OK, we create the OK for the result enum. And that means every time we call the open that return result, we can actually use the match. Actually, it's not showing it. Actually, it's in the form of match error, which is another kind of writing, the checking for the error condition. Actually, I will go into the detail about this expression later. This is called closure, which is going to be explained on the next topic. So for now, let's have a look back at the previous example, like on the topic 5. Let's go back to topic 4. Okay, this is the example of extracting the values from result type. Because the method like parsing the string would return either success passing values or the error in case that the string cannot be passed into the values, like the integer values. So if we match OK, that means we can pass the values. Like if we try passing the integer, and if we get the OK, then we get the integers. And that values would come into what's inside the parentheses after the OK tag in the match statement. Then we can use n for anything in the calculation. But if it's error, then you do something else, like reporting errors. I will pause this a bit so that you can reflect back onto what we have done previously. So every time you do the passing of the string into some values, make sure you check if you get the values or if you get the errors. Okay, so that's a bit more about working with arrays. So alternatively to using arrays with index, if you use iterator, you can write it into another style. And this would be useful if the values within the array or vector is more complex, like if it's not contains just integer, if it's complex structure like the tuple or another array, then this pattern would be more very useful when writing the code. So let's look at some more real example on how we use this. Okay, let's think about the function that we would want to write that would take a list of numbers and then find what is the minimum value within that collection, for example. And this would be the arguments and the return types that we would use for this kind of function. So whenever we deal with a list of numbers, we would use this type for requesting that the function would take arrays or vectors for the list of numbers. Let's test how we use it on the main function. Actually, I have to make a correction on the return type because we want to find the minimum value, so we only get one number out of the function. That means we get I32 as a result. And if you try this one, you will see that you get the error at this point. And that's because the parameter is requiring to get what we call slice. So this is the syntax for requesting a slice into some collections or the list of values. So In this case, we need to put the reference into the function. So we need to put ampersand in front of the value. And at this point, we get 0 because we just specify that we will return 0 always from the function. So if we want to complete this, we have to keep modify the function until we get into the final solution. So for the start, we would need some values to store the final result. So we declare using the let statement first for the bin values, so that we can return that. And then the last statement would become this. Actually, it's the last expression because the last expression is the result returned from the function in Rust. Then we would have to iterate to each value in the slice that is passed into the function. Before that, let's have a look at if we try to apply the values from the vector like this one. And you see that by using ampersand in front of the values, you get the slice that can be passed into the function. And you need to remember that you don't have to specify the size for the slice. Otherwise, it would be defining, requesting that the function would take the array that must have exactly the size specified within the function, like this one. So if you take this one for the 10 values, then this would not work. Even simple array would not work if the size doesn't match. So this wouldn't work as well. So if you put the size, that means you require that it should be exactly 10 values, for example. But if you want variable size, then you request normal slice, because the size would be provided together with the whole slice automatically. So you don't have to do anything about the parameter. And then within the function, we can use the while loop to iterate through the values, like in the previous example. So this would be the skeleton for iterating through each values. So we use while with the next method on the iterator. And then because we want to check for the minimum values, so if we find that the new values is less than what we have on the minimum values, then we would have to replace the previous minimum values with the new one. So we need to update that with this code. for this simple function, this should work. So let's prove that it's true by testing the program. Actually, because we request slides, which is some kind of what we call reference. Every time we try to do something with the values, it's through the reference. So sometimes we need to use ampersand to explicitly request that we want the reference into the values. Okay, and it might look strange at first, but this is the patterns that we use. Some is used on matching with the option value. So when every time we call iter.next, we get the option that contains the values or contains none if we exhaust the values. If the line number 4 is something different than the iterated, then it would have to have the next method that returns the option in order to get the while loop to work. So this iter.next would give you the option that contains the values if we still have the values left for reading. But if there is no more data, then we get none. And then it would cause the while loop to exit out of the loop. So with this building block and matching the sum with the reference, actually every numbers in the slice would have to be accessed through the reference. So we would have to match the reference in order to get into the pure value within the collection. So we can do it this way or this way, which would look very strange. Actually, it's going to be this one. Because we are trying to take the value out of reference and assign it to another value. And we would have to do this as well. So that gets quite complicated. And if you look at the result, then you can see that this version is not correct because we get 0 instead of the minimum value that we should get. And can you think, can you find what's wrong about the code for finding the minimum values? What's wrong so that we get the 0 instead of 1 for the minimum? Anybody can find what's wrong with the code? Because I define 0 as the minimum value first, and every value within the slice is never less than 0, so we get 0 as the minimum value, and that is not correct. So if we want the correct values, we should start with the first values in the arrays instead. So instead of using the minimum value with 0, we should start with the first values. Okay, so this is gonna be the building block for what we would get for the correct program. So instead of running through with the while loop, we check for the first values first, for the minimum values. If we don't have any values left from the slice, like the empty slice, then we return default like 0 on the else condition. But if we have starting values, then that comes into the min variable. Now we have something different about the dereference. So we have reference against reference, so we don't have to use the ampersand anymore. This is password for the change. And because we want to change the min value, we need to mark mutable on the let statement, on the if let statement. Password. You see that I get it wrong, because the mutable needs to be placed here. Okay, now that we get the right value. And within the body of the loop, we have several ways of doing this one. Like taking the reference so that we don't have to dereference it again. And in that case, we have to do it for the inner while loop as well. Actually, it would be the ampersand would have to be before the mud keyword. Okay, taking reference would not work. So if you try something like this, you can, and it's not work, then you revert it back to another way. The reference rule would be a bit strange, so you need to get familiar with it in order to get it right. So you can see that I tried several times because I need to change something back and forth in order to get it right. But you won't get it right if you don't understand the logic behind why it has to be that way. Okay, that's for the calculating the minimum values. Then what if we want not just the minimum, if we want to find the maximum as well? Then what needs to be done for that? If we want both min and max in one go, then we would have to use tuple to help us out. That is just one way to do it, but there are more than this way, but I will just show you this way because it's the simplest thing that we can think about on this example. Actually, if you look back at the mean values, I do return 0 for empty slice on simplicity. But actually, if you want to differentiate between having minimum values or having no minimum values, then instead of returning the integer, then you would have to use option instead, so that you can identify if we have the result or if we have no values. So I will leave that as an exercise. So the option type as a return would be as shown on the comment. Let's continue on the min-max values. Actually, it goes the same way. If you want to differentiate between getting the result or getting nothing, you would need option for the tuple as well. That's for your take-home exercise as well. Now we update both the min and the max values on the statement, and then return the tuple as a result. And because this involves the reference and reference that's related to the borrow mechanism on Rust, which is going to be detailed on the next topic, on later topics. So let's keep noticing the patterns on the example, and then we will get to that at later time. Okay, with the right code, you get the right result. And if you want to make sure that you get the right result, make sure you write a test case to cover every use for the function. Okay, and the print format, we can use shorthand format as well. So that's quite handy. And as you see on the statement, you can use tuple on the left side for the list statement, so that you can take two values out of the tuple values. That is the result from another expression. So if you know that this function, the min-max values, is returning the tuple, then you can use let with tuple declaration and take two values out of the function result. If it matches exactly, then it works. But if you take option, then the let statement is going to be changed according to the type on the return for the function. this is the possibilities that you can take for the exercise because it's in the same class. It's just changing something in the body of the code, and then it will work the same way. So once you know how to iterate through the number list, then calculating things like shown on the exercise shouldn't be too difficult. And for a bit challenge, try returning option and then use it in the main code. Another thing I need to mention, if you try calculating mean values for another type that is different from I32, then you would have to do the same code with different types and different function names as well. If you try with the generic, like presented on the book, you will see that it's not easy to follow and get it right that way. This is the possible generic version that we can try out. Let's see if it works or it won't. You see that you got the problem with number 0. At this line. So we will leave this issue behind at this point because this involves a bit more detail on later topics like constraining the type, which is quite advanced at this level. So let's skip the generic version first. But once you know about how to specify the rules on the type, on the generic type, then we can take this exercise and then make it applying to any kinds of value instead of just integer. Because we need the type parameter so that we can replace it with either integer or floating point or something else. So we need another kind of parameter in addition to function parameter. You can read more about this on chapter 10 in the book. Because we need to know a bit more about other things, then we just leave the exercise at this point. Okay, so before we take on another example, let's take some break for the half time. And if you have any questions during this time, then feel free to ask. Let's have a break for 15 minutes, then we'll resume back for another example.